Is this the most difficult Premier League table to predict ever? Because that's what we're about to do, with the me being me, JJ Bull, and the we also being
me, John McKenzie.
But John, why is it so difficult to predict the Premier League this season?
Well, I think there's a lot of moving parts to this season. Not only is there loads of new managers, more than I think we've had ever.
It feels like a lot, yeah.
Ever? I think it's 8 new managers. And if you throw De Zerbi in as basically a new manager, and then you throw in the promoted sides coaches, just to make my point even more strong, even though it's maybe not valid, you've got 12 managers there that are having to deal with these new circumstances. So there's that. But I also think that the league itself, from a tactical point of view, has changed a lot over the last few seasons. We've gone from a position where the consensus was play football like Pep and you'll do well. Don't play football like Pep and you won't do well. And then last season we had, your Sunderlands and your Brentfords and your Bournemouths up there. So something has changed from that point of view. I also think that there's been a competitive compactness as well. So I think it's just become much harder to say with any sense of certainty where a team's level is and where they will finish at the end of the season.
Basically, there are lots of variables, and that's why I am not sure exactly where everything's going to go. One of the clubs that has lots of variables, they were really poor last season, massive underperformance, counts as a new manager, De Zerbi, you would say. Where are Spurs going to finish?
Well, I have got Spurs in 6th place.
Interesting.
Which is obviously much higher than 17th,
yes,
which is where they finished last season. They've overhauled a lot of the squad that they had, particularly the midfield area. They brought in Tonali, they brought in Fernandes. With Fernandes being able to offer a little bit more of that technical side that is required in those small spaces, and then Tonali to do a lot of the bigger space stuff, a little bit more intensity into that midfield. So they've done good work there. I do think that they're probably lacking a little bit in terms of the forward areas. But the other thing I would say as well is I do have some kind of tactical, not concerns, but questions, I would say, about Spurs, because everyone talks about baiting the opponents forward. Actually, I think what's quite interesting now is in the 5 years since De Zerbi started at Brighton, the Premier League has changed so much in terms of man marking. And also I think there's a realisation by teams that actually if you're going to spread yourselves out in the press and not go as a collective, then they will just hurt you through the middle. So what we've started seeing more often, I would say, is teams using 4-4-2 diamonds, because it gives you a much more compact centre of the pitch. Makes it much harder for them to build through the middle. Does allow spaces to open out in the wide areas. When they were going through the middle, they were able to build through the centre and hit these spaces behind. They were so dangerous. I think it's slightly less dangerous when they're being forced into the wide areas. So it will be interesting to see how De Zerbi's tactics evolve over time. And the other thing is we saw again at the end of his time at Brighton, is some teams would sit deep and force them to break down low blocks, which just sort of takes away the ability to generate those really dangerous artificial transitions they used to take as well. So because of all that, I've got them in 6, just because I think there's so many variables that it could go one way or the other.
I think similar. I wonder whether they have the firepower up top to score the goals they need. The transfers seem to have fixed a lot of the issues they had, like progressive passing. And one of the things, Van Heck is a really good signing in that. I like Tonali and Fernandes. And interestingly, I thought you might change what I thought about them, but actually, I also have them in number 6, would you believe?
So I did change what you said.
No, I already had them in 6, I think, according to my list. So another of the clubs that massively underperformed last season was, of course, Chelsea. I've put them in 5th, but I have thought, when preparing for this, that they could finish anywhere along the top as well. There's a few things I think are interesting about Chelsea, specifically that obviously Xabi Alonso's there, and we know that he's done very well as a coach, specifically at Bayer Leverkusen. But what I think you'll see from Chelsea is that there's not going to be one way of playing. They're going to adapt from game to game, and they're going to adapt in-game. From what we've seen in pre-season, they're doing the 4-4-2 zonal block, where you push teams back. The trigger is when the ball goes backwards towards the goalkeeper. They all go up, push onto the man-to-man, and that's how they force it. But against AC Milan in a friendly, they're playing with a back 3. So you see everyone's here, and their jobs are to push onto these men here. So this is something that I didn't know we'd see. I thought he would stick with the 4-4-2. So they push on to the players, start to go man-to-man. You can see the players are about to run to where they're meant to go. AC Milan's natural network to get out of it is along this way here. But as soon as the ball goes towards the player they think it's going to go to, everyone jumps onto them and they get really touch tight. And so there's no escape. You see everyone's really tight, man-to-man, all over the pitch, which is something different they were doing in the other pre-season friendlies. But the whole point is not that it's either a 3 or a 4. It's going to be different all the way through, and that will make them hard to play against. Now, I've put them in 5th, but I have thought, when preparing for this, that they could finish anywhere along the top as well. He's trying to correct the culture, which is definitely one thing that needs to get sorted. And we've done this in a video on the channel. It's like a season preview, a sensible transfers almost of Chelsea. He's going to teach them a lot of things he wants them to do, and then has to rely on the players to be able to execute that. They've got a young squad, so whether they learn that in time to be able to do that properly from the very start is kind of interesting. And whether it'll actually work either, because he has to make it all work while other teams are super organised and really going against him. And I think there's enough variables there that other teams can find weaknesses and punish them in certain games early in the season. So for that reason, I'm going to be conservative and have them in 5th.
I've been bullish. I've got them in 3rd. They don't have Europe, I guess.
That's a good point.
That squad, I think it's a good squad. They also, as you said, the issues it's felt like in previous seasons is we've talked always about indiscipline, getting loads of yellow cards and red cards in silly situations, and they've looked to address that by bringing in some older players as well. And again, look, Jordan Henderson has been brought in. I don't expect to see him playing a ton of minutes, but I think what you buy those players for is to be a good influence around the training ground and make sure that the younger players know this is what a serious professional looks like. I'm going to take my job seriously. I'm going to turn up to training even though I'm not going to get a ton of minutes and work really hard. So I think they've started addressing some of those things as well, and they've just got lots of, I think, fun players in this squad who at some point, there's a few issues that in certain areas of the pitch they need to deal with, but as soon as these players start sort of hitting their peak, Chelsea are going to be viewed as quite a good team. So I've gone a bit bullish on them, so I've put them in 3rd.
So there are other new managers too, like for example at Crystal Palace. Where are Crystal Palace going to finish?
Yeah, Crystal Palace is an interesting one. As you say, they've got a new manager, Pierre Sage.
Who is he?
Well, he's a French coach. He doesn't have a huge amount of experience. Last season he was at Lens and put up a bit of a title challenge with them, albeit that was a season when PSG were playing their B team in Ligue 1 to focus on the Champions League, but he still had them in that title challenge. And the interesting thing is that he's playing the same kind of system as Glasner, so it seems as though they've been like, we've got Glasner, he's moved on, he's played this system, put it in place, let's keep with that system, bring in a coach who is able to do that. So definitely a continuity option. They've also strengthened the back line. They've sold a few players. Obviously Marc Guéhi and Maxence Lacroix went off, but they've brought players in there, and they've strengthened their right-hand side because when you're playing a wing-back system, you really have to have, I guess, fit and healthy wing-backs who can do a lot of ground coverage in those areas. So I think they'll be sort of there and thereabouts where we usually expect them to be. I have got them in 14th place.
And I have put them in 15th, which is basically exactly the same thing. Another one of the new managers at clubs who can't figure out exactly where they're going to finish, I think it's a really difficult one, is Newcastle. And their new manager is a 38-year-old. This doesn't seem right. Matthias Jasla, who's come in from the Saudi League, where he's done quite well, did very well at Red Bull Salzburg as well. You can pretty much predict what they're going to play like. It's going to be very narrow, lots of forward football, always going forward, lots of high pressing, intensity and energy, all the buzzwords that all the managers have now. It's going to look something like that. They've brought in new players. Razumana on the left wing. Voltman is playing as a number 10, it looks like in pre-season. Alanga is lucky not to be injured for the other day, and Bamba is midfield. But they've also lost Guimaraes and Tonali, which is hard to tell. Guimaraes, I think, is one of the best players in the entire league, and to lose that is pretty massive. Their fullbacks are both injured at the moment, so they're not going to have that from the start of the season. They need to sign fullbacks. I've swung between thinking Newcastle might be in danger of being towards the relegation places, and then also swapping to think that they might be a lot better off than we think. No European football, so that's good for them. Could be either that it seems like a reset without those big players that they've lost. It could also be that, I don't know, it's really hard to tell. But for that reason, I have put them in 8th place, which is different to where I had them about an hour ago, and different to where I had them 4 hours ago. Where do you have them?
Actually, very similar to you. I've got them in 9th, which I think is maybe a hot take from the two of us, because I think there's a lot of people who have them a little bit further down the table for reasons that we've just discussed. But,
like I did 3 hours ago.
But I think they've got a fairly decent squad, despite losing some of their better players. I'm a fan of Jasla. I think he's a good coach, and yeah, he has the ability to play the kind of football that Newcastle have played in the last few seasons. But I think he's also a guy who isn't just wedded to that Red Bull style. He's definitely a guy who gets the most out of his players and has the approach of seeing what his players can do and trying to make that work for the team. So I think bring those two things together. Maybe people are slightly underrating the squad. Yes, they've got to develop quite a few young players that they've brought in, but I think they've still got a spine in there that will be okay. So I've got them just finishing in the top half.
And another team that I cannot tell where they're meant to finish is Bournemouth. You know a lot about Bournemouth.
Yeah, and they've got a new manager as well. So yes, they've replaced Andoni Iraola with Marco Rosa. Hard to tell, I think, when you go from a coach who's actually been poached by another team for doing so well, that you sort of carry the the good parts of the old coach and the good parts of the new coach early on, and then at some point the old coach sort of diminishes a little bit. So again, Bournemouth had a really fantastic pre-season. They're looking pretty sharp. They've also got European football as well, but they have changed their play style. They're not defending quite so aggressively as they used to under Iraola. So again, hard to know where they're going to come out. I've got them in 10th place because I think the combination of Europe and a new coach will probably just slightly diminish them this season.
I was looking through the squad and I think it's I really like it. I like Ryan on the right hand side, Evan Nilsson through the middle. Kluivert's a decent player as well. I think they have a decent team there. I think the European football thing will affect them a little bit, and I don't know enough about how they're going to play with the new manager as well. So for that reason, I've put them slightly lower than you. I think I've got them in 13th. I think that's where I've put them, and I'm going to sit them there now anyway. I think that's fine. Next of the teams with all the new managers is Fulham, who have hired Alvaro Arbeloa from Real Madrid. There is no way of knowing if this will work. He only had about 5-6 months at Real Madrid. They did okay. They were fine. I don't know what it is they've seen in him. Perhaps he's done something amazing I don't know about. They've also lost Harry Wilson and Jimenez, who's gone back to Wolves, I think it is, which is 19 goals from their team. So they have no one who's going to score goals. Gonzalo Garcia's come in. He's decent, but again, you don't know how good he's going to be in the Premier League. You don't know. And for that reason, I've gone with a very hot take on Fulham. I think they might even be as low as around about here. But I also think they might have a new manager around about November, and if they do, they'd probably be here. So. But maybe he'll be great.
I've had the same thought process and put them in 16th.
Now, I know you want to talk a lot about Nottingham Forest for a great length of time.
That's true. I'll be quick on Forest. They've got Glasner. We all know what to expect from Glasner. I think he will get a tune out of this Forest team. But I've put them in 13th.
Although we know what Glasner does, I wasn't sure whether he'd do something different now, because he's been playing a back three at Crystal Palace. You think that's what he'll do, but he's been doing the same things at Palace. So I have put them in, I think I've put them as high as 10th, actually. Yeah,
and, if there are any Forest fans who are annoyed that I've put them in 13th, I think they'll have probably a good run in one of the cups. That's what you get from Glasner. So that's the thing to be excited about, Glasner at Forest, I think.
Now, we're just talking about how good Bournemouth were with Iraola, as we all know. But he has moved on to pastures new at Liverpool.
Yeah, again, another situation where it's really hard to know how it's going to go with a new manager going in to take over a team. A couple of things with Liverpool. I think, in many respects, I think Iraola is almost the opposite kind of profile to Arne Slot. And I mean that in terms of the way that their tenures are set up. With Arne Slot, what you got it was him going in early on, imposing his style, it being very easy to pick up, it suiting the players, and then working for that first season, and then potentially getting found out a little bit the following season, although there obviously are caveats as well. Whereas I think with Iraola, what you get is very different. It takes a while for you to learn the system, with the idea being that process that's painful at first should produce something that's greater than the sum of its parts.
It took a while at Bournemouth.
Yeah, so 10 games before they got their win, everyone was like, oh, maybe this doesn't work, this guy isn't cut out for Premier League football. And then once it clicked, you could see very quickly the benefits that were there. So I think that we'll get that with Liverpool. I think it will take time for them to get to a level where they're actually playing the tactics well enough. Once you reach that point, there is still the question of, can you scale up the tactics for a team like Liverpool as well? The other thing to say about Liverpool is the squad needs a lot of work, especially with a new coach coming in who has a very different style of play. So you can see, even just visually on the board here, you can see that this right-hand side where Mohamed Salah was now looks very empty. And then the midfield area as well, really interesting for me, because we've seen Gravenberch playing almost as the deeper player in the two pivot players that they have. And I sometimes wonder whether or not he might be more suited in the more advanced role. And then the question is, are you happy to run with someone like McAllister and Trey Naoni, who's been really good in pre-season, as your two options, or do you want to bring someone in and strengthen there? Across the rest of the pitch, there's just areas of weakness. You've got Van Dijk and then no one really behind him. They have brought in Ronald Araujo from Barcelona as a loan option to cover the fact that you've got Bradley injured, who probably is going to be quite an important player for them once he's fit. Joe Gomez has just got injured again. Jacquet is currently injured, so taking time. So it's almost like Araujo was brought in as a loan option just to give them a little bit more of an option here as well. But the other thing is that Iraola has come out and said, my players can't really play at the intensity required for longer than 30 minutes right now. So it's just going to take time. And I think that's the question with Liverpool is, like, how long does it take them to hit their stride? Do they ever hit their stride? And so as a result of that, I'm going to put Liverpool I'm going to put them in 5th place because I think this is going to be a transition season for them.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as you're saying, because I have them in 4th. I might swap them and Chelsea around, but I think what Iraola does quite well is profiles players correctly. Like he puts players in positions that maybe I hadn't seen, or just ones that gets more out of them. And so I think he'll get the most out of players like Wirtz and Isak, who should.
He's already been doing that in pre-season as well, right?
So you get that. And once he gets players in that can play the way he wants, that'll be the bit. But the thing I was trying to consider, exactly what you said, is it can take a while for that to all click in, and he might have to adapt, so it might not be the full thing that you see. So it probably would be safer to have it the other way round.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had 4th and 5th the other way round, and then I've moved Liverpool one place lower. But again, there's so much uncertainty about this that, you can't beat yourself up about every little place.
Well, we have to get it right, otherwise we'll be cancelled.
That's true.
The only team I do know for certain is going to finish in a certain position, I'm sorry. Or am I? To Hull, because I have them in 20th and I have no doubts. Simply because I don't know if they'll have enough and they've maybe not signed enough there. The other relegation teams, in 19th place, who do you have?
In 19th I have Ipswich, I'm afraid.
You have Ipswich. I think I have Coventry in 19th. And then in 18th, are we going for all the newly promoted? Yeah, we're going for all the newly promoted. And you'll never guess who I'm going to put in the...
Do we think that anyone will actually challenge for relegation? I mean, I guess you've got Fulham there.
Yeah, I think Fulham will flirt with it. I feel like one of the sort of medium teams will be in amongst it. There's a few that we should talk about, like Everton's one, who I think will probably be flirting amongst it. But I have them as being, I think I have them in 14th, something like that, because David Moyes' Everton just seem to always finish 13th or 14th, and they've not really done enough to think they're going to climb up the table. I think they'll have to be somewhere in there.
Yeah, I've got them in 15th, actually. The team that I do have in this slot is Sunderland, which is maybe incredibly controversial, given they had an incredible season last season, but I think they overperformed a little bit last season, according to the underlying numbers. Now, take that with a pinch of salt. I don't think that the underlying numbers always represent where a team should finish. There's explanations for why a team might overperform. But I do think that they probably did overperform the level that they were at. I think add into the fact that they haven't done a huge amount of bolstering of the squad, and they've got Europe next season. I think it could be a bit of an interesting season for them.
Yeah, I was looking at them. I think they signed really well last season, and I was surprised they finished up so high. It was no performance. Like, expected numbers show that there's slight variances, but I think they're good, and I think they're comfortably a mid-table. So this is one of the only places we might diverge quite a lot. I think they'll be about 12th. Another team I'm pretty sure could be in amongst the battle is Leeds. I have put them in 16th. I think they could fall into it too. Could you convince me otherwise?
Probably not, because I've got Leeds fan bias.
Oh, so we're a little bit round. Okay, yeah. That's fine. Yeah.
So, and I guess that's sort of what you have to do in these predictions, right? You have to go bold with some and less bold with others. But yeah, I think Leeds have strengthened in certain positions, and they had a good season last season. Again, the numbers the other way around for Sunderland had them maybe a little bit higher. And so I think if you get the continuity there, and Leeds are an interesting team because like the intensity they play at, I think makes a difference. So you'll watch a Leeds game and they'll do nothing for 70 minutes. You think this team aren't very good at all, and then they'll have 10-minute bursts of intensity where they just managed to get a couple of goals, and that was enough to turn things around. I think they had a lot of games where they would perform better in the second halves of games when it's almost like the table was set and they knew what they had to do. So I'm expecting to see that intensity come through them for them again. I do think that there's maybe the possibility that the error bars on them are quite wide just from their play style. So if those 10-minute periods of intensity that they have don't come off, then they maybe finish a little bit lower. But if they do, then they finish a little bit higher. So kind of interested to see how they go this season. But I've been positive, mainly because I'm scared of my Leeds fan friends if I put them any lower.
Speaking of fans you're scared of, here is Manchester United. I think they've actually done pretty well in the transfer window. I think this is quite a fun team to play. I think Tielemans and Andrew Santos are really good signings. I think having Mount profiled as one of these players as well works really well until, well, he's not injured, looks like, he seems to be fine. But I like the mix, like 2 players for every position is roughly what they've got. You can play Mbumo through the middle, as a striker. He likes that, and it gives Sesko a bit of room to develop. He's got Xerxes playing in behind, a bit like the Fernandes thing. Rashford's going to make a big difference as well, I think. I'd like to see how Carrick deals with him, because we know about his out of possession stuff, maybe not the best. But I just think the way United are going to play this season is a bit not exactly the same as the way Chelsea are and how adaptable and how much they change. I think United will be able to do lots of different things at once. I think he's drawn lots of tactical inspiration from lots of different managers. So he does things that De Zerbi would do. He does things that the managers he would have played under would do. And they'll try and bait teams at times, but also they'll try and keep possession at times. I love when they get all the players together and do little rondos. Obviously, you can't have all these players on the pitch at once, but it looks something like that when they think about it like that, you know. But also they play long when they need to. They just do what's right for the game. And I'm sure you've seen somewhere since Carrick took over Man United in the 17 games in the league he was there, they were top of the league. Therefore, they should probably be quite high up. But I have changed where I think they could be a few times. In fact, in an early draft of my table, I genuinely had them here. And I think there was a world in which this happens, genuinely. Stay with me. Because like all it takes is some teams to not turn up early in the season, or like Liverpool, for example, to not quite adjust quite quickly, or maybe Arsenal are tired, or City are just rubbish. And then a good team can just poke in behind, and they're one of the ones who be sat there. Chelsea could be another, actually. But just to be safe and to make sure I look...
This is getting screenshotted, by the way, you know that.
I'm going to put them in third. Do you think that's mad?
I don't think it's mad. Again, I think error bars everywhere. I've got them in fourth place, actually, mainly because I think the added European workload for them is going to be big.
Yeah.
I still have issues with Man United, particularly out of possession, and you know it's the thing we've been talking about all summer, which is like, do they need like a large space coverer in the middle because they play with this really aggressive 4-2-4 shape with the wingers quite high. Sometimes it can get played through, and then you're relying on your Andre Santos and your Tielemans midfield to actually cover a lot of space. There's ways of being able to mitigate that, but I don't think we've seen a ton of them so far. So I'm still a little bit hesitant on Manchester United, but I do agree that they'll be fun to watch. I have liked a lot of the stuff that they're doing with the ball. So yeah, I've got them in fourth again, just mainly because of the continuity aspect with Carrick, and I think they have brought in players. Really interested to see how they play, because I think if you can get away with finishing in the Champions League spots with playing maybe a slightly underpowered midfield from an out of possession point of view, it maybe makes us reassess what the best way of playing football in the Premier League is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Speaking of teams who play very well in the Premier League, Aston Villa keep seeming to overperform, I think, but maybe that's where they belong. I have them in seventh. Emery's changed a few players. Obviously, he's lost Tielemans as one huge one, brought in a few to try and replace them. Where do you have them this season?
I also have them in seventh, which I think is maybe arguably a little bit low. And, you know, Villa fans will point out that I've constantly underrated them, and I've been proved incorrect on many occasions. Villa, whenever they get in the Champions League, they seem to then have a knock-on impact in their league performances. This time around, I think there's a question whether or not they've strengthened enough to actually withstand that. They brought in some fantastic players. So Johan Manzambi, they brought in Joao Gomes from Wolves. I think both of those signings I really love. There's also like other exciting things. So Brian Maggio, the youngster they've got come through, they've just won this appeal with the Court of Arbitration for Sport to allow him to play for them this season. Really, really exciting player, 17 years old and already 6'4", 5", I don't know. But I think...
By the time he's finished, you could be 9 feet tall.
Exactly. He's still got growing to do, which is a scary prospect. I expect Villa to be really good. And like you say, they could. I wouldn't be surprised to see them finishing top 3. I don't think they'll finish much lower than 7th, but I've sort of got them here just because a lot of the other teams in the Big Six have spent a lot of money and changed things around. So yeah, interested to see what Villa do this season.
I cannot tell Brighton and Brentford apart, but because Brighton made it into Europe and how that might affect them in how many games they play, I have put Brentford higher than them. I've put them here and Brighton in there. And I suspect you're about to do something quite similar to me, unless you've got one of them in first place, do you?
I am going to do something quite similar, but the other way round. And having heard your point about Brighton having European football and Brentford not, I'm starting to regret my decision to do this. But yeah, I guess I've gone with continuity. With Brighton being a team who have kept many of the same players. They've actually bolstered the squad in places as well. They've also kept their manager. This also applies to Brentford, by the way, who have done the same. They've signed Mamadou Sangare, who's a really exciting player as well, which maybe means I should have had them the other way around. But I'll stick with why I've had them like this. My instincts must have been correct for a reason. So I can guarantee next season, Brighton 8th, Brentford 12th.
Now that has obviously left us with just 2 teams, which are of course the champions, Arsenal, and the ones who's normally champions, Manchester City. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the obvious thing to do is just put Arsenal in number 1 spot.
But
there are caveats, I think. This is the conservative pick to make, because I think, Arsenal, we know that they're the best team in the league, and have been for a number of seasons now, with City falling off in the last couple of seasons. City have lost Pep Guardiola, who obviously was their coach for a long period, and Arsenal have just won the league, so they've got that off their back. But there's little things where I just kind of think, could City finish ahead of them? I'm probably not going to go with City first, Arsenal second. I'm actually going to go Arsenal first, City second. But I do think there is an argument to be made that we don't know what Arsenal are going to look like next season. We saw a lot of their players actually having been sort of fairly worn out after last season. We've also had a World Cup summer, which we've not really talked about as well. And players like Saka, I think Declan Rice, players who aren't going to be injured, but have had injury issues in the last few seasons. You could probably add Martin Odegaard into that as well. It sort of raises a few questions to me, as in, will their level drop a slight bit because they've got over that line of winning the league? The other thing is, and this is, I think, more impactful for my decision to, and would be more impactful for my decision to maybe flip them around, is what happens if Pogba come out and say, we've changed the rules around set pieces. I think that would be enough for me to think, okay, wait a minute, there's something going on here that maybe means that Arsenal will be more negatively affected than someone like City.
I think everything you said about Arsenal is exactly valid. I think it's interesting that they've gone for players like Bruno Guimaraes, who I think is a great all-round midfielder, a lot more creative than some others that they have. Mm-hmm. I think maybe Arteta might, now he's done it, he's got over the line, they can then churn into something else. And that could be where they're trying to go. I mean, whether that will work or not. Players being burned out is one thing.
It could be a transitional tactical season then, yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I suspect he'll try and make him attacking at start, and then a bit like Mourinho used to, just draw them back in to make sure they're hard to beat. Enzo Maresca, I feel like his teams are quite boring to watch, but I feel like because Guardiola's changed over the last 2 years to start being a bit more transitional is maybe the wrong word, a bit more direct, and just trying to make use of Erling Haaland especially, and that is a different kind of football to what we're used to. And the level of control that Maresca teams have with the players that they have in that Man City team gives them something else that might actually really work. And so, speaking of fans you're scared of, I'm going to put Arsenal in second place this season. I think the control that Maresca gives Man City, when you go through the squads, I think Man City will have something about them, just because I feel like the mental toll of last season and the physical toll of last season might just mean that Arsenal miss out a few games, so maybe they don't get the corner goal that they needed to get over the line. It could interpret in different ways. It could be that now the mental block is gone, maybe they're more free-flowing and they score more and they're even better than last season. But I feel like if Man City tighten up the back end, because the front line is amazing, but it's the back end that was letting them down last season. If they tighten that up, that is a team that should probably win the league with the players that they have.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bold call. I don't know if I would go all the way with you, but I think what we've started seeing in the Premier League over the last few seasons is that what determines who wins isn't quite the same as what used to determine who won when Guardiola was in his pomp, right? Which was that ability to, as you said, that Maresca has, to control games and produce goals out of those controlled game states, both with and without the ball. Actually, what it seems as though is happening more now is a team that has good momentum early on, or doesn't have poor refereeing decisions, or manages to avoid injury for a while. Those are the teams who are seeming to have a good run of form and then hold on long enough for it to hold out. So I'm still going to go with Arsenal first, but I could see a world where Arsenal are slow to start the season because they take time for their players to get up to speed because of the as you said, the gargantuan effort of having won the league last season, and City are able to sort of have a nice little run in and stay ahead for the season. But I'm still going to be conservative and lame and stick with them in first place.
I think that's fine, John. I also genuinely think all of these teams could finish in different positions from what I've said, and I could justify all of them being in different positions, except for Hull.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football